Well, while Beth is getting that started, I will introduce myself. My name is Ruth Wilson, and I work at the Central Library in the local history department. I've been there about 4 years, and I've been with the library. Come on in. Welcome. I've been with the library, this is my 21st year. And this program about Welcome to Kalamazoo 1917, this comes out of my work in the 1917 newspapers. We have a database, an index of articles of the Gazette, many other things, but a lot of what gets used is the Kalamazoo Gazette. Goes back to the 1830s, so that when you want to come and do research, we can help point you to the right newspaper. So I go through these 1917 newspapers and look for obituaries and death stories, because that's the first thing we harvest out of them. And as I was going, I just kept finding stories that were so delightful and interesting that I started collecting them. Long about June, we started thinking maybe this could be a program. So that's how this came about. And I had way too much material for one program. So I focused on bringing you things that maybe you didn't know about already, maybe things that are less familiar to you, things that show you what daily life was like in Kalamazoo in ways that it's different than now. And there's a lot about transportation because 1917 is a really interesting year for transportation. The car culture is coming, but we don't quite know it yet. And it's basically organized topically, but also chronologically. We're going to start in January, and then we'll finish up in December. Okay? When we get started, we've got to do now, we don't have microphones here, so if you can't hear me, wave your hand, okay? And I'll try to speak up. And I have to sit down mostly because I have a pinched nerve that's causing me some pain. So I have to sit down a lot, and I'm afraid that means with the projector, not all of you can see me at a time, but, and I don't want to block anybody's view of the screen. Hello, welcome. Thank you for coming on this fine night. So anyway, I'll try not to get in anybody's way, and I'll try to be brief the whole time. So before we get started into the newspapers, we need to take a little look at the vital statistics of Kalamazoo, so we know what kind of a town we're talking about. Kalamazoo 1917. In 1917, the size of Kalamazoo is just a little over 8 square miles. Today, it's just a little over 25 square miles. So we've about tripled in size. Population-wise, 1917 is not a census year, so we only have an estimate. The official estimate was quite high. I think the population is about 47,000 somewhere in there. But we've had a big burst in the growth rate and since 1900, and it's been due mainly to one industry. If you know what that industry is, shout it out, I'm curious.
Paper.
Paper, yes, exactly. Here you see, I'm sorry these lights up front don't turn out. Can everybody see halfway okay? This is a postcard of the paper mill. There's the Bryant paper mill and Illinois envelope over there. And we started out with just one paper mill in 1867, and they just kind of proliferated because everything they needed was right here. And there were also related industries to take the paper and make things out of it. Playing cards and paper boxes and envelopes and so forth. And at this time, Kalamazoo is #1 in paper tonnage in the United States. And it was such a big industry that of all the men here tonight, 50% of you would have worked in a paper-related industry. The first story that got me all excited about 1917 was this one. 3 faithful members of Kazoo Fire Department will be discharged. Isn't that a shame? Here it is January and 3 guys are fired already. I felt sorry for them, so I found a picture of them. There they are. That is Ned, Tom, and Bill. I don't know which is which, but you can see they're pulling the boiler pump there. Now, it used to be, before 1915, the Central Fire Station had all horse-drawn vehicles. And in 1915, they replaced the ladder truck and the hose truck and the fire marshal's truck. They replaced them with motorized vehicles because they said that they were faster to get ready and be ready to leave than horses, and they were more maneuverable in the streets. But they had to keep horses on the boiler pumps because that was so much heavier. But in 1917, some one-ton trucks start coming out, and they're building the things that are heavier and can pull them better. Here they all are in front. You can see the 3 trucks that they've got in place already, and then these 3 horses soon to be gone. But it's starting to show, even already in January, we're starting to understand what motorized vehicles are going to be to us. Cars are still called pleasure vehicles. We haven't quite figured it out, but the firemen are leading the way here. So now we know how the fire department got around. How did the rest of us get around? I hope you can tell where you are on this old postcard. Do you recognize that you're on West Michigan looking toward East Michigan, and there's the Peninsula building and Portage going off to the right? I know it's, let me turn the light off just for a second so you can see this. It's really good. There. Is that much better? Sorry, Korey, that's just such a beautiful postcard. I couldn't resist it. But you can see where you are. If the view doesn't look quite right to you, it's because American National Bank building isn't there. That doesn't go up until 1930. And I love this view because it shows you there's so much to unpack here. The why, you know, have you ever wondered why there's a Y in the road? It's because this was early days of the village. The Portage Road, that was the road that went to the sawmill. And all of the lumber for the early houses that were built came over that road. And off to the other way, that was the way how you got to the ferry to get across the Kalamazoo River and on to Battle Creek or Detroit. That was old history even in 1917. So you can see some of our skyscrapers, even though the American Bank isn't there yet. You can see we've got some tall buildings. You might wonder, these buildings are tall, are there electric elevators, or do people have to climb the stairs? The answer is yes. All of these commercial buildings do have electricity. They have lights, they have the elevators. The Hudson Cafe is right here. They take out an ad in the paper that says they've got an electric dishwasher. And you should come and eat there because their plates and utensils are extra clean. And you see that they have street lights. Those are also electric. And they know exactly how much it costs to run them, and on nights where there's a full moon, they don't turn them on. You've got the moon, you don't need these lights. So we're going to talk about the transportation, the vehicles on the street here. We've got, if you can see it, this yellow thing down there, that's a streetcar. You can see the tracks. We've got cars, we've got pedestrians, we've got horses and wagons. There would be also bicycles, and they're all on the road at once, and there's no rules. There's basic drive to the right, and that's all we've got going. There's really no traffic control at this point at all. I'm going to go on to the next one. And another thing that's on the road is a jitney bus, and I'm thinking maybe you guys haven't heard of jitney buses before. Anybody? They were only around in the United States from about 1914 to 1919. At their peak, there were about 175,000 of them. And they were sort of an early Uber. Because if you had a car, you could fix it up. Like this woman, she is in the paper because she's our only woman jitney bus driver, and her husband is the conductor there. And you could fix up your car, and you could drive around Kalamazoo and pick people up and take them where they needed to go, and they would give you a nickel. That was called a jitney. So it was a jitney bus. And she, Mrs. Forrest, she would drive down Portage Road from, I think, 3rd Street to Bryant. If you worked at that Bryant paper company I showed you, Mrs. Forrest might drive you there. And they don't last very long because the cities really don't like them. They compete with the streetcars, and the streetcars are paying taxes to the city, and these are not. So they do their best to regulate them out of business by requiring licenses and fees. They have to be bonded. Of course, there's a legitimate concern about the passenger safety too. But to anticipate Camp Custard a little bit, when a jitney driver wants to take people from Kalamazoo to Camp Custard, he has to pay for 4 separate licenses in order to do that. So it's hard to make that up on nickels, you know, $12 a pop and trying to make it up on nickels is pretty difficult. So I have a treat for you. This is I love it, it's really cool, I think it's a treat. It's a video from 1906 that street elements are all the same things on there. And it's a filming company put a camera on the front of a streetcar. So all they're going to do is, they're in San Francisco and they're headed toward the ferry building in the distance there. And you kind of get an idea of how people drove, and there's no crosswalks. People cross wherever they want to. If you want to cross in front of a streetcar, you just honk your horn. It's really mesmerizing to watch. It lasts about 11 minutes. We're going to skip ahead just a little bit and show you a severe collisions here. People just stand in the street. See that guy? He's now totally blind. He can't see anything of where that streetcar is. Find that on YouTube, and it's really fun to watch. You swear you're never going to make it all the way to the ferry building, but there's no accidents on this particular one. Did I do that okay?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. All right. Thanks, guys. So this is what happens here when you amp up the traffic volume a little bit. Now this is Detroit. In 1917, in Kalamazoo County, there are 4,000 pleasure vehicles, 4,000 cars. Kent County, for comparison, there's 9,000. Wayne County, 47,000. Nobody has a driver's license. They're not required. You have to have a plate, you don't have to have a license. No age limits. So all these people are on the street and none of them have driver's licenses. And this is a good example of the danger of people getting off the streetcars. They're in the middle of the road and they still have 3 lanes of traffic before they can get to the sidewalk. So it's really no wonder that Detroit pioneers traffic signs for the nation. They've got so many drivers, so many cars, and they invent the stop sign and traffic markings. They don't invent the stoplight. Cleveland, Ohio invents the stoplight, but Detroit adds an amber light to it, so I think that's what makes it really, really good. Now in Kalamazoo, we don't have that many cars on the road, but they still manage to hit each other because there's still no particular traffic control at all. They are all the different elements are running into each other. The person whose headache this is the Chief of Police, Charles Wesley Struble. And he is trying to take a page from Detroit here and put up some traffic signs. Now, nobody's ever seen traffic signs before, so they don't even know what to call it. The Gazette calls it Chief Struble's red-headed deaf and dumb traffic cop. And he put it out on the street on the corner of Rose and West Michigan, and somebody hit it the very first day and broke it all to pieces. So that's what happened. And we're very fond of Chief Struble at Local History because one of his relatives brought us the family genealogical papers, including, with the set, his meerschaum pipe. And so we're thrilled to have Chief Struble's meerschaum pipe. He spent his whole career in law enforcement in Kalamazoo. And here's our sheriff. His name is Elton Eaton, and he has problems of his own because the traffic, the speed limit out in the country is 25 miles an hour, and you people are not going 25 miles an hour when you drive in the country. You're going, he would have looked the other way if you'd only gone 30, but you're going 35 and 40 in the country, and now he's really upset about it. So he has not only hired more deputies, he has deputized the road crews. And if they see you going 35 or 40, now you have to go 30. You must go 30, you must go 25. Going 30 isn't good enough anymore. If you speed, you get arrested. There's no tickets. You don't get rid of the ticket. You get taken to the judge. And you make your appearance there. Some days, speeding is not really a problem. This is what happens when you have to drive on the bad roads in the United States. And it's really pitiful, but that was the way it was a lot of the year. Now, we still did have, there was some work being done on paving. The Good Roads movements was, thanks to bicyclists, was coming about. And there were the plank roads, you know, the corduroy roads that had been built for stagecoaches. Those are still around, but they take a lot of maintenance to keep them in good shape. And nobody's maintaining them anymore because of the railroads. So even if you can get to one of those corduroy roads or plank roads, it's not going to be a good experience. It's better than that, though. I put this slide in because I thought some of you might wonder whether I ever saw anybody predict the future. And I did. This is from the Good Housekeeping in 1917. This Portland Cement Association has foreseen a United States with a connected network of paved highways with heavy loaded trucks, like trucks carrying goods to all parts of the United States. They've only got 2 parts of Illinois hooked up, but I think they see the future pretty clearly, the Portland Cement Association. So how else did you get around if you couldn't drive like we can today? Well, this is a picture of the railroad system, and it shows you that Kalamazoo is a hub of the railroad system. Not all of these are rails of steam locomotives. Some of these that are dashes, those are interurban rails. And I want to know if anybody's heard of interurbans. Oh, good for you. Oh, good. You just heard of them, or you maybe got to ride on one? But you knew about us. Yeah, oh gosh, I wish they were still around. An interurban was kind of like a streetcar that would go between cities instead of just between city blocks. It needed rails, it needed electricity, you had to have the juice on the catenary, it's called, and the wire, and then the pantograph made the connection. Not all of them were like that one, but this particular one is. And they had some real advantages over steam locomotives. They were cleaner. You didn't come off with bits of cinder and soot all over you. They were cheaper. They were only about a penny a mile to ride on. And they were quieter if you cared about that kind of thing. And also, you didn't need to go to the station, the interurban station, to start your ride. You could be out in the country and go by the side of the track and signal the conductor, and he would stop, the motorman would stop and pick you up. So it was very convenient, not just for getting people from city to city, but also getting people from the country to the city. And if the people in the country can get to the city better, that is good economic business for the cities. They really value that. And they publish these maps. This particular one was published by First of America Bank to show everybody in the countryside which train to get on in order to come to their grand opening, which will be later in November. Another reason that we found interurbans very convenient was the local option. Have anybody heard of the local option? Prohibition is coming, but not till 1920. But in 1915, counties could vote on whether they wanted to be wet or dry. Wet meant you could have alcoholic beverages, dry meant you couldn't. And nearly all of the Southwest Michigan counties voted to go dry. Kalamazoo went dry. So the closest county that was wet was Kent County, and it's on the interurban route. You can get on an interurban and you can do whatever you feel you need to do in Grand Rapids instead of in Kalamazoo. But we lost a lot of businesses when that happened, and the brewery never came back, but its descendants did. We have breweries again in Kalamazoo. This is a look at the interurban station around this time. You can see a few cars over here. And this is what it looks like today. You recognize it over on Rose, I think. And that used to be Vermeulen's furniture store, and it started life as an iron foundry. The Lawrence and Chapin factory was an iron foundry, so the furnace was back there. And that's what it looks like now. I don't think anything's in it right now. In 1917, we loved the interurbans, and we really thought that this was the future of transportation. We thought there was just going to be more and more interurbans and more places you could go, but we were wrong. Actually, we didn't know it, but the number of route miles for interurbans has already peaked in 1916. There's never going to be any more route miles than there are now. Also, and you might be more surprised at this, the number of route miles for steam locomotives, well, for locomotives, has also peaked in 1916 at 250,000 route miles. So you can see the things are falling into place, the signs are coming, the cars are going to be the coming thing, but we just don't quite realize it yet. One of the big disadvantages that the train companies had, is they'd make the cars, but once they got the cars done, they had to build the track and the grades and the trestles and the tunnels and maintain everything. If you were an automobile manufacturer, you didn't have to do anything but make the car, and the government was more and more stepping forward and taking care of your transportation. That's another thing that's going to make it very easy for cars to take over American transportation. Oh, there's one more thing I'll tell you about this. The kinds of trains didn't like each other either. The interurbans were not liked by the railroad companies. The railroad companies had a rule that no interurban could cross a railroad track. So Kalamazoo's completely ringed with railroad tracks. How are they going to get their cars to the station? They had to build these, roller coaster-like overpasses to get over the railroad lines. So here's a few more indications, just early signs, if you know what you're looking for, that cars are coming. Excuse me, there, I wanted this. Chief Struble that we talked about, he sees all of the applications for license plates, and he can see the growth rate of how many people are having cars, and he's predicting quite confidently every family is because he was going to own a car within 6 years. And then, of course, every new year, you should get a new car. They're realizing that even in 1917. There's a lot of car companies in Kalamazoo manufacturing, really a surprising amount. In March of 1917, the Barney Motor Company comes to town, and the Gazette is so excited they give them a 12-page supplement, so you can read all about it. If you would like to see some roamers in person, very beautiful ones, the Gilmore Car Museum, you want to visit there. They have, I think, 3, and they were working on a 4th. Oh, it's time for a commercial. This portion of our show has been presented by Ambition Pills for Nervous People. If you have general debility, or nervous prostration, or unstrung nerves, you can take these pills and they will fix you right up. You can buy them at the George McDonald Drug Company. And snake oil. Snake oil is a beautiful thing. You can either drink it or rub it on yourself. If you drink it, it'll fix your tonsillitis, your sore throat, whatever cures you, whatever ails you inside. Or if you rub it on you, it'll cure the lumbago, rheumatism. So that's definitely a bargain. Well, in April, what we have known is coming arrives. War is declared. And there are some people on the Ad Council in Kalamazoo, and I think that they realize that life is going to change in Kalamazoo pretty quickly, maybe forever. And before the war has a chance to really get underway, Kalamazoo throws a big party. It's called Kalamazoo Week. It's a week, and they planned it so quickly and they fit so much into it. It's a week of all kinds of contests and displays. You can get, you can walk through the downtown area and see in the windows there'll be manufactured goods, and there's a contest to guess who made what. They throw a lot of ink at it. There's just for months they're building up to this Kalamazoo Week, and it happens like this mid-May, 13th to 20th, I think it's at. But I think the greatest thing that happened, before I tell you the greatest thing, I'll tell you the second greatest thing. Does anybody collect postcards? Oh, good for you. If you can find a postcard that's an old view of Kalamazoo, and it's postmarked May 1917, you have a treasure. Because they went around having the Boy Scouts sell these postcards, and they wanted you to fill them out and mail them to the farthest flung friends and relatives that you had, because they wanted the name of Kalamazoo to go all the way around the world. Okay, now I'll tell you, this is the first greatest thing. The Kalamazoo Gazette commissioned a movie company from New York to come and film a movie in Kalamazoo, all Kalamazoo locations, the Stove Company, the St. Luke's Church, W.E. Upjohn's house, inside his house, and only Kalamazoo citizens and residents could be the actors. And it's not as random as it sounds, because there were companies that went around doing exactly this. They would go to a city and they'd have it all canned and ready. You could pick one of several scripts, and they told you exactly what to do. Well, the way it worked was the Gazette printed this coupon, and you would vote, nominate and vote for who you wanted to be the leading lady and the leading man, and maybe Atherton, you could even have a little kid. And this is the lady who happens to be first place at the moment. And when the period's over, then those are the people in the lead get the parts, and they film the movie. And they wrapped it up as fast as possible, and that movie was produced and developed and returned to Kalamazoo in time to play at the Majestic Theater to packed audiences, packed crowds, and they were all in love with it. And it was just the greatest thing ever. And another thing that was made it extremely popular is not just the elected actors got to be in it. If you wanted to be in the movie, whoever you would, you could. There were lots of scenes that required extras. So they would tell you where to show up at what time, and you would be in the movie too. There's a great big denouement at the end where they needed crowds and policemen and everybody's running back and forth. And you could be in it too, so you could always go and see yourself in this movie. The big question is, what has happened to this movie? Now, it may not exist anymore because the film might not have been stable. It might have poof. Silver nitrate films could just go poof. Or it could be 3 canisters of sort of vinegary black jello. But what gives me hope is that Quincy, Massachusetts had it done. A Romance of Kalamazoo, and they had a Romance of Quincy, same plot. They had theirs done in 1914, and in 2014 they found it, and it survived, and you can find it on the internet. I don't know if the whole thing is there, I haven't seen the whole thing, but lots of clips are on it. So all of you need to go home and look in your attics, tell everyone you know, and look in trunks and garages, and see if you can find 3 silver canisters that say a romance, from the Hudris Company, the Romance of Kalamazoo. Because you can charge me any amount that you want, and I'll pay it to come and see that movie. Well, the party was over. We had to take up the war. We put it off as long as we could. And I put this story in because this is the first Kalamazoo man who was recorded as killed in action in France. And there's something special about it. He was not fighting in the American military. He went to Canada several years before. He signed letters of assent. He went to France fighting for King George. Many men did that. They were anxious to fight the war and fight the Germans. And that's what he did, and he was killed. So that's a big reason that he was one of the first casualties. And since he wasn't fighting with the armed forces in America, there's no record of him in any of our books about American military, Kalamazoo military men. He's not in the DAR scrapbooks or anything. So I wanted to honor him by putting him in here so that we could at least know about him. Actually, I don't know if any of you are Dutch, but the first people who would have left Kalamazoo to be in the war, also not for America, Dutch immigrants who weren't naturalized citizens yet. The Holland asked for them to return to the Netherlands because even though they were officially neutral, they wanted anyone who was still a citizen to come back and help with the possible defense of it. So they were actually the first ones to leave Kalamazoo. And now this is our National Guard, who is rapidly being turned into the 126th Infantry Red Air Division, I think. And the crowds are seeing them off at the railroad station, and their commander in the National Guard has been Colonel Joseph Westnidge, and he goes with them. As the commander, he's allowed to keep that spot. Unfortunately, he does not return. About 18 days after the war ends, he dies of complications from tonsillitis. And it takes a few years, but his body is eventually returned, and he's buried in Riverside Cemetery. Here's another look at the boys and the National Guard who went with Colonel Joe. And they really, when they joined the National Guard, they couldn't have been sent. They were meant for the state constabulary, and sometimes they could be brought in for service anywhere in America, but until 1916 they couldn't be sent to overseas. But so they are maybe getting more than they signed up for and being sent to France. Now, if you weren't already enlisted, then you had to register for the draft. And it all happened on the same day. Everybody had to register for the draft on the same day. Apparently standing in long lines was not considered a problem. And they meant everybody. If the homeless people that are living in boxcars, the inmates at the state hospital, and the prisoners in jails and prisons, they all had to be registered. And the Gazette was very helpful. They wrote articles about helping people if they, at various stages of their immigration, know whether they had to register or not. And they also told you what the physical test was going to be like. One of the things they said was that in order to be qualified for the military, you had to have at least 4 molars in your head, 2 on each side opposing. So if you had any teeth pulled, you might disqualify yourself for the service. This is my grandfather's registration card, and he does end up being exempt, but he did go there on the right day, on June 5th. And I want to call your attention to this corner triangle over here. It says, you won't be able to read it, it says, if person is of African descent, tear off this corner. And the reason that it says that is because the military is segregated. For the first time, there's going to be black troops, and they're going to have African American officers for the first time. But it is still going to be segregated. And Kalamazoo at this time was also segregated. And because I know this topic is one that's close to the hearts of people in Kalamazoo, I wanted to take a couple minutes and show you what you would be reading in the Gazette at this time concerning the races. And this has nothing. This is not to come down on the Gazette or on the community. We know that this is what America was like in 1917. But I think that it's good to see it with our own eyes. The articles I'm going to be showing you fall in about three categories or levels. Now this first one, we can see problems with it with our 2017 eyes. We can see grouping when they feel they have to say prominent colored resident is dead instead of just a prominent resident. And as for pictures, this is the only picture I know of that appeared of African Americans in 1917. But compared with what's coming, you could say that the people who wrote these articles were not intending disrespect. They were not intending to write hurtfully about anybody. But that kind of changes a little bit when we go here. Now here we see right off Al Jolson in blackface. That is proliferating racial stereotypes and racist attitudes. And these 2 articles here are showing you can only catch a glimpse of the segregation. And these are 2 that give you a glimpse. The baseball players who are African American have to have a team of their own. They can occasionally play against a white team, but they are never allowed to play with a white team on the same team. Same with for the club. They don't have any place for the Camp Custard black officers and black soldiers to come. These are more troublesome. This story is about what I mentioned before, about that the black troops are going to have black officers for the first time. But the headline writer has written the headline in dialect, and then there's this very troubling double meaning of stripes for Negroes. He's referring to the patch of a sergeant's stripes, and he's referring to the stripes on a man's back when you beat him. Stripes for Negroes. I can't really explain what this person was thinking when he wrote this. He was saying that he was at Camp Custer and he was sitting next to a window writing, and he thought that a black cloud had gone in front of the sun, and he looked out the window and saw that it was only a troop of black soldiers walking by. So, yeah. And this is the third category, and when I found all of these articles about lynchings and so forth, I really was puzzled by them, troubled and puzzled, but I couldn't really tell, there's no context to tell you what the Gazette's attitude toward this is. When you see this, Negroes hanged for usual crime in quotes, it sounds kind of cold, it sounds kind of brutal, you know, and I really could not tell what the attitude was, especially since I was seeing a mixture of other kinds of articles. But fortunately, I did find an editorial that put it all into perspective. The attitude of the Gazette towards these lynchings was outrage, and they were putting those stories in. They were pulling them off the AP wire. They had it then just as we do now. They were pulling those stories off the AP wire and running them because they wanted you to be outraged too. And this is an article, an editorial called American Atrocities. And they're talking about lynchings, and they're saying, how can people be outraged at what is happening in Europe, what the Germans are doing in Europe, when atrocities are happening all around you and you're saying and doing nothing. So this article really put the rest of it into perspective so that I knew what they were trying to say. So that's kind of a photograph, a snapshot of what the kind of writing you would have seen. Oh, it's time for another commercial. Well, here's a sentence that should never have been uttered by anybody. Come on over and see my corn fall off. Oh dear, if you had corns on your feet, you wanted some of this medicine and it would fall right off. But Fred Appledorn at Appledorn's shoe store wants you to know that if you wear his educator boots, you see those fit like a corset and they just shape your foot and you'll get bunions and corns. He wants you to know if you come to his store that he will sell you shoes that are comfortable on your feet. There is still a remnant of Kalamazoo today of Appledorn's shoe company. V&A Bootery. V&A was Van Dis and Appledorn. He had a partner and then he sold out to the partner. So when you walk by there, you're walking by a piece of history right there. It goes back over 100 years. His father and his grandfather made shoes too. His father would go out to his grandfather would go out to your farm with you and help you choose which calf would be killed in order to make your shoes with. So as the war heats up and things are getting underway and soldiers are leaving, the Gazette, three topics take over the Gazette almost completely. There are three things you will constantly be reading articles about. One of them is Camp Custard. You know, I've never thought too much about Camp Custard myself. I've never been there. I've never driven that way. But it is such a major deal, the idea of 50,000 men coming and living in our yard. And they were terribly worried about it. And changes in eating patterns and fundraising for the war and war relief. Those are things that you read about every single day. I'm just going to give you a sample of them. This is the very first article that Kalamazoo ever saw that told us that Camp Custard, now Fort Custard, was coming. This is when we realized that it was going to be somewhat permanent because they were putting steam heat in instead of just little heaters. And there's a view of the soldiers, some of the soldiers in the mess hall. It took Kalamazoo quite a while to figure out what our attitude should be. At first we didn't want to build any roads to Camp Custard. We didn't want those soldiers to be able to even think about coming to Kalamazoo. But slowly we came around, we realized we wanted to be hospitable, we wanted to show these men the kindness, we wanted other people to show our young men wherever they were training. You know, a lot of them were in Waco, Texas. So slowly we come around. Almost the first thing that happens is Police Chief Struble wants all the prostitutes to leave the city. They go around and if they don't leave, they'll be arrested. And you had to be able to demonstrate how you earned a living or you had to leave. They formed committees to address concerns like entertainment, legal questions, and so forth. Just trying to think of ways that they could be helpful to the men. And they do even lay down some interurban track, and there's 6 or 7 round trips a day. So we come to terms with Camp Custard. It takes quite a while. The food thing was a big problem because we had to feed our troops, we had to feed our allies' troops. There was so much starvation and hunger in Europe at this time. This cartoon shows you the world as a baby. It says enough for everybody except Germany. Uncle Sam is going to undertake to feed everybody who needs food except the enemy. And Herbert Hoover is the man that they put in charge of it. And he gets right to it. And he comes right out and lets you know what he wants you to do. And Kalamazoo does it. I mean, we get right on board. He wants you to cut way down on meat, wheat, sugar, and oil. Those are things they want to reserve because they can be sent overseas, and they want to send it to hungry people and to troops. They want us in Kalamazoo to eat fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, and fish, and whole grain bread, which we're eating better than the food that we're giving our soldiers, really. And they want you to garden, and like this lady is doing, and they want you to can. Here's some people from Western Normal School who are teaching women how to do canning in a school over on West Vine. And we have days where we go, don't eat any meat at all, don't eat any wheat at all. So the changes that you were called on to make were pretty radical, and there was a lot of social pressure to stick with it. This 9-year-old young lady catches 9 bass in one day. Why aren't you gentlemen doing the same? And they also think we ought to eat sparrows. And the Gazette is very helpful. They tell you how to catch the sparrow, how to kill the sparrow, and how to cook the sparrow. And they suggest that you should build a cage and keep it full of sparrows, and then when you need one for a meal, you just reach in and pull it out. And of course, when you eat a potato, they want you to cut the eye end off and save it so it can be used for seed still. But they don't want you to kill the pheasants. Now, you might think that would make a bit better meal than a sparrow would, but they're trying to build the flocks so that they can one day have licenses for them like they do for deer and for other hunting. Until the 1960s, pheasants were more popular with hunters than deer were. I think if we'd gotten hungry enough, they might have let us eat the pheasants. There was a thing called doing your bit. It was that was the way it was expressed of what you should do, anything you could for the war effort. If you didn't do your bit, you were called a slacker. And so this shows some of the various ways that people did their bit. And oh my gosh, Kalamazoo really did their bit all the time. They were always thinking of things, ways to raise money, ways to send money. Here's the firemen who are knitting whenever they're not out putting out fires. You can knit bandages and sew bandages. One of the women's clubs adopts 100 French orphans. The papers are full of this kind of thing. You can't run out of it. It's just constant. The only thing that didn't really go over very well was the official Liberty Bond that they wanted you to buy, and they would pay interest on it, and then some years later, like 1947, it would be worth face value. People at that time did not understand what Liberty Bonds were. They didn't understand it as a saving instrument. They did not buy them. The problem was that every county had a quota that you were supposed to buy to help raise money for the government and prosecute the war. Well, we didn't want to be embarrassed by not meeting our quota. I mean, heaven forbid that we should miss ours and Calhoun should meet theirs, or Kent, or anybody else. So the businessmen of the city waited to the last minute, and when it was clear that we were falling way short of our quotas, they would buy up the difference. But in order to encourage you to buy these Liberty Bonds, they would actually take them in as a down payment on a car, And Gilmore's put out an ad that encouraged you to buy war bonds for Christmas presents. And that was pretty, unselfish of Gilmore's to suggest you should buy that. And here we see what women are doing, with the men gone, there's more for the women to do. Here they're working in factories. This is the sled company. I'm gonna give you a quick look at this. Isn't that nice? There they are working in the sled company, and there they are in the Darcy Street Spring Company, taking the men's places. This is Carolyn Bartlett Crane. If you haven't heard of her, anytime you study Kalamazoo history, she will rise up to meet you. Because she did a lot of things. She was a progressive reformer concerned with many, many things. When the war comes, she takes charge of every committee. And here she is urging women to carry their own parcels when they go shopping, because men and cars need to be reserved for a war effort. And of course, here it is, it's like getting into September, October now, and the fields are ripe and there's no workers to send, so they try to get men from the factories to go out and volunteer on the farms, and they do get some. They don't want to waste anything. So, as all this is going on, we're looking for ways to distract ourselves. Here's, you can go and see the Buffalo Bill Wild West show. Buffalo Bill has died in January, so he died in January 1970, so he wasn't able to come to this one. But he had been in Kalamazoo many, many times. And so this was one thing we had to do. And racing was a big thing. Oh, this is another beautiful one you have to see. This is what we know of as the Fairgrounds now. It was Recreation Park at the time. And it was built for races, and harness racing was a big deal. And not just harness racing, but you can go back in the early years of the village and find horse breeding and training going on. This is the Oakland Park. And anybody could do a whole program just on that. There's a book coming out about it. Keith Howard is writing a book on it. That was an amusement park. Anything that was new they had. It was owned by the people who owned the streetcar system to give people a place to go on weekends. There was a dance hall, a roller coaster, boat launch. It really becomes a casualty of the car culture, because once people have cars, they're not running the streetcars out here, they drive to other places because they can. But it's a wonderful destination and much loved for a long time. And there's still rumors that there's a roller coaster at the bottom of Woods Lake.
Where, this was by Woods Lake?
That was by Woods Lake, near the, like across the street from Winchell neighborhood. Well, now it's October and it's county fair time. And oh, if you can't see this guy, oh, I'll cry. Here is, this is Harry Gardner, and he was also known as the human fly. And what he did was climb up the fronts of buildings. Street clothes, street shoes, his hat, his little round glasses. He's in New York, in case you didn't know that, he's not Kalamazoo. But yeah, he went around the country and just did that. Well, he comes to Kalamazoo in 1917, and we're all excited about that. We're pleased to have him. He climbs up this is the second courthouse, and it's right where the third courthouse is now, between Bronson Park and West Michigan there. There's the Gazette photo of him climbing up the front. It didn't say he did, but I think he probably climbed up the flagpole after he got up there, because that was what he usually liked to do. That's what he did in the afternoon, and then in the evening, at nighttime, he climbed up the Rickman Hotel, which is still standing. And he climbed up the north face of it because it would have given more room for people to see him. Took him about 30 minutes up and down. And because it was nighttime, he wore a white suit, and they had a searchlight on him as it went all the way up and down. So you could see him really, really well. Well, if that weren't exciting enough, I'm going to leave it just a little bit longer, because this picture, when they will make anything up. There's bank robbers who've come to Kalamazoo County, and they are breaking into banks at night and blowing up the safe. I've got a new vocabulary word for you, yeggs. Yeggs are people who break into banks and blow up the safes and take all the money. You might need to know that for a crossword puzzle. So it's Y-E-G-G. And they hit Madelon, they hit Climax. This is what they did to the Climax safe. Now this is a great time for bank robbers because they've got three things that they didn't have in the old days. They have got dynamite, and they know how to use it. Lots of them were now in the Civil War. And they can make nitroglycerin, the safe crackers soup. They've got electric drills. That's how these robbers got the dynamite into the safe, was they used an electric drill. And they have getaway cars. So what could be better? And so this really irritates Sheriff Eaton, and he trails them south. But they've gone north. And they hit Alto and they hit Middleville. And I have to tell you quickly, they had some style. When they hit the Alto Bank, first thing they did was they had a couple of followers and a road close sign, and they put the road close sign on the end of the road where the bank was. And then they broke into the bank, they took all the money, and then they gathered up all the guns that had been left there by the security guards. The security guards didn't take their guns home, they left them in the bank. So they gathered up all the guns, and they took them into the office of the president of the bank, and they arranged them in fanciful little patterns all over his desk. And so when he came to survey the damage and the loss, he found their calling card there. And I have not been able to find that any of them were ever caught. This program will continue after station identification. Another commercial. Women, doing the laundry is really too much for your strength. I mean, really, don't you always feel like this when you have to do the laundry? And if men had to do the laundry, then they would see very clearly that the thing that needs to happen is that you need to call Kalamazoo Laundry Company, and they will come down with their wagon, and they will pick up your dirty laundry, and they will wash it for you and fold it and everything, and then they'll bring it back on their wagon all clean. So anybody can see that that's what you want to do. It's November 1st, and there is a new tax, and there is a penny shortage. There's not a penny shortage because the Yanks took all the money. There's a penny shortage because the tax is 1 cent, and if you paid a dime to go to the movies, now you need an extra penny. If you don't have one and you give them 15 cents, they have to give you 4 cents back. There's not enough pennies in the city to do this. And there's so many things that have the war tax on them. I've only given you 2 examples. There were about 8 or 9 of these little cartoons that showed you all the things that were getting a war tax put on them. So they asked you to please go into your children's piggy banks and take out all the pennies and bring them to the bank. And they even show you the way to the bank. This is the railway map we saw before. It seems like a strange time, but Thanksgiving Day was their grand opening. So they wanted you to get on the train and come to First National Bank and tour the bank. And while you're downtown, they had municipal services at the Masonic Temple. That was something that you hear a lot of in 1917. People really gathered together in big groups an awful lot. I think it was a big part of the entertainment that they had going there. Herbert Hoover has opinions about Thanksgiving dinner. You can have chicken, rabbit, or goose. Yeah, I guess I'll take the chicken. I'm not excited about rabbit. Well, December. We're in December. We're finishing up here. Oh, it's not a good December. It's a very bleak December. One of the first things that happens is this terrible explosion in Halifax, Nova Scotia. A munitions ship runs into another ship. It's not a very bad collision, but it's enough to start a fire, and the fire detonates all of the munitions on it. The death toll goes up to 5,000. And even now, it's considered the largest non-atomic explosion that has ever happened. So we've got that that's making us feel bad. It's really cold out. Blizzards all over. They say that the mercury went 15 below zero. There's a coal shortage, partly because of the terrible weather and all the snow and the blizzarding. The coal is on railroads, and they can't get them on the trains. It's too congested and confused, and the government has to take over and run the railroads in order to get coal out to people. And as if that weren't enough, the news from the war, we're starting to hear stories about Sammy's American soldiers being killed, captured. There's even talk of torture. So we've got a lot kind of weighing down on us in December. And we desperately need something else to think about and talk about for a while. It can't make your problems go away, but at least you can think about something else. Well, this young lady from Mossy Rock, Washington, she gave us something else to think about. She was 22 years old. She, as I said, she lived in Washington. She decided that the thing to do was stow away on a boat. She stowed away on a lumber schooner headed for Newcastle, Australia. What could possibly go wrong, right? She gets discovered once they're well out into the sea so that she can't be sent back, and the Captain Peterson gives her a good scolding and says, you'll have to work as a stewardess until I can send you home. And she says, that'll be all right. Well, problem is, there's a German sea captain who's patrolling the Pacific, and he catches ships, he evacuates the crew, he sets fire to them and he burns them. And he runs into the schooner that Miss Taylor is on, and he does exactly that to them. And they said, this guy, they said if he captured you, you were lucky because he never killed anybody, he only captured people. So that's her new situation. Her story could be ending very unhappily, but she's been taken on aboard this ship, and to protect her, the American sea captain says that she's his wife. He introduces her as Mrs. Peterson. So she's protected and respected, everything goes well. What could possibly go wrong? They get shipwrecked on a desert island. This is Mopelia. And they run aground, and there's a gale and they run aground, and they can't salvage the ship. And so the Germans, they set up their tents on one side, and the Americans set up other tents on the other side. And she gets treated like a queen. She's having the best time of her life. Everybody brings her whatever she wants. She doesn't have to cook. They take care of her. Everybody respects her completely. She's having a great time. Well, eventually the Germans build a raft and they sail it to the next island over, Fiji. And in due time, an American ship arrives to rescue all of the Americans. And she gets returned to the United States, where we wondered what happened to her. We were really wondering. I'll explain this picture in a second. Beth and I were combing Ancestry.com trying to find out what happened to Gladys Taylor. She's only 22. The trail goes absolutely dead. So I wrote to the Historical Society in Lewis County and said, have you ever heard of this girl? You know, she did all this. She lived, you know, she was a resident of your county. They said, we've never heard of her. But the director of the museum did some research on her, and he filled us in. And one of the reasons her trail went dead was she was not Miss Taylor when she stowed away. She was Mrs. Taylor. She was running away from her husband in a pretty thorough way. So when she gets back to Mossy Rock, there is a divorce waiting for her. But she does get remarried. She marries the man who manages this theater that you've been looking at. It's in Portland, Oregon. And we love to think of her going to that theater and watching movies of high romance on the Seven Seas and remembering the good old days on Mopelia. And we are grateful to her for bringing some tropical sunshine into a very dark December of 1917. And the lights are going out. Well, it is a beautiful postcard, you have to see it. There, isn't that nice? Lights are literally going out in Kalamazoo in 2017 and 1917. What's ahead for us in 1918? Well, the war will end in November. But the Spanish flu is coming, the Spanish influenza. It's going to kill millions of people. It'll kill more people than died in World War I. About between 4,000 and 5,000 people in Kalamazoo will be affected. The death rate is not that high, amazingly and miraculously. So the human flight, the cities in America decided is way too dangerous for people to be climbing up their buildings. So Harry Gardner and all the other men who did the same thing, they have to go to Europe to find buildings to climb up. And Harry Gardner goes to Europe and is never heard from again. We don't know what his demise was. And those yeggs never got caught. So that is the end of 1917, but not, I hope, of all the interesting stories that we can still learn about it. Are there any questions you would like to ask? You're all just too kind of worn out with 1917.
Mine are just quick, like where things were.
Okay.
The fire station you showed at the beginning with the 3 horses, where was that?
That is on the corner of Burdick and Lovell. That is where the Epic Center is now, and Jacobson's used to be.
Yeah, okay. And then you mentioned on Rose Street Bermulan's, where
Yeah, I think that's real close to the Masonic Temple. I think it would be like across the street from the Cancer Center and Museum, if I'm picturing it right.
And just a couple, the Majestic Theater,
The Majestic Theater,
you mentioned.
gosh, there were so many theaters.
But
I got them all mixed up. I think the Majestic might, it was the Michigan Theater was right next to American Bank. We had a ton of theaters. But next time I see you in the library, I'll look that up for you.
and the only other thing, you had mentioned the potatoes and the eyes. They say, what did they save the eyes for?
They could use them for seed potatoes.
Planting.
Oh,
For planting,
that's
yeah.
what I don't understand.
Yeah, and actually it was Carolyn Bartlett Crane who offered to take all these soggy bags of partial potatoes, and she would make sure they got delivered to the farmers. Yes?
Question. When you were mentioned the woman jitney driver,
Yeah.
that she was the only one, or was she the first, and then, like, did she kind of lead the way or pave the way for others, or?
She was the only one as of 1917. And they hang around until 1919, so there could conceivably have been one after that.
And so was that really unheard of then, and like people looked at it kind of?
Yeah, I guess they must have thought it was pretty unusual because there were all kinds of jitney drivers that they could have done articles about, but they chose to write about the woman.
Well, and also that her husband was a conductor, so he would collect the
Yeah.
nickels and get people on.
So those nickels were supporting at least 2 adults. We don't know if they had children, but they were really hustling.
And then I have another question about was that the horses going to the fires, taking, them to the fires. Did they have to train the horses to something so that they wouldn't get spooked by the fire, or, I mean,
They were very well-trained horses. I haven't read anything about how they behaved at the fires, but I know that the barn there, the fire station, they had an electric stall, arm in front of the stall, and when the alarm went off, the barn would lift, and the horses were trained to leave their stalls and stand in front of the wagon that they pulled. So they had a lot of training. I imagine it extended to, we have some wonderful books about firefighting at this time. If you want to come to local history, I'll find them for you. Yeah, is there anything else? Well, thank you all so much for coming. Good heavens. Thank you.
Yeah.